In 1865, a 7-year-old boy named Alonzo Herndon was freed from slavery in rural Georgia. He was turned out into the world with nothing but the clothes on his back and his mother, who had also been enslaved. Just over 40 years later, he was Atlanta's first black millionaire. Now, this isn't just another rags to riches story. This is the story of how, from the ashes of the Civil War and in the heart of the segregated South, a powerful network of black fortunes was forged on a single 2-mile stretch of road. A street so prosperous, so vibrant, and so self-sufficient that Fortune magazine would one day call it the richest Negro street in the world. This is the story of Sweet Auburn. It's a story of audacious ambition, of calculated genius, and of a community that, when locked out of the American dream, decided to build its own. It's a narrative driven by titanic figures who refused to accept the station assigned to them. Men like Alonzo Herndon, the cautious and meticulous builder who laid the foundation, and men like Heman Perry, the visionary dreamer who tried to construct an entire interlocking empire. Together, they and countless others didn't just create businesses, they created a dynasty. They built banks, insurance companies, newspapers, and cultural landmarks that would not only generate millions, but would also provide the financial bedrock for the civil rights movement. This is the forgotten history of Black Atlanta's old money, a story of how fortunes were birthed from oppression and how a street of dreams became a multi-generational empire. To understand the miracle of Sweet Auburn, you first have to understand the world it came from. Post-Civil War Atlanta was a city of paradoxes. It was the gateway to the New South, a hub of commerce rising from the destruction of Sherman's march. But for its black citizens, this new beginning felt hauntingly like the old one. The promise of Reconstruction had quickly withered, giving way to the suffocating grip of Jim Crow laws. This wasn't just about separate water fountains, it was a complete system of economic, political, and social oppression designed with one brutal purpose: to make sure the racial hierarchy of slavery endured, even without the chains. In this world, black people were systematically locked out of the mainstream economy. White-owned banks wouldn't give them credit. White-owned insurance companies refused to cover them or charged predatory rates. White employers pushed them into the most menial jobs, and the threat of violence was a constant shadow over any sign of black progress. The system was designed for them to be sharecroppers, laborers, and servants, a permanent underclass. So, what do you do when the entire system is built to ensure you fail? You build your own system. Segregation, intended as a cage, accidentally became a crucible. Because black Atlantans couldn't do business downtown, they were forced to create their own commercial center. They did it on a street originally known as Wheat Street on the city's east side. At first, it was just a place of necessity, but as more people fled the poverty of rural Georgia for the city, it became something more. The street's name was changed in 1893 to Auburn Avenue, a name that sounded more fitting for the community's aspirations. It started with the cornerstones of any community: churches. Places like Big Bethel AME and Ebenezer Baptist Church became the spiritual and social centers for Black Atlanta. Around these pillars of faith, the seeds of enterprise began to sprout. A doctor's office here, a small grocery there. It wasn't Sweet Auburn yet, not the powerhouse it would become, but it was a start. It was an ecosystem born of exclusion, a quiet declaration that if they weren't welcome in Atlanta's world, they would forge a world of their own. The man who would lay the first and most enduring cornerstone of this new world was Alonzo Franklin Herndon. His story is the archetypal American dream, but with a degree of difficulty that's almost impossible to imagine today. He was born into slavery in 1858 in Walton County, Georgia. His mother, Sophony, was enslaved, and his father was her white enslaver, a man who never acknowledged him. When emancipation came in 1865, Herndon's family was turned out into the world with absolutely nothing. The family started as sharecroppers, a system that for many was just slavery by another name. But Alonzo had a relentless entrepreneurial drive. From a young age, he worked as a laborer and peddler, selling peanuts and axle grease to support his family, meticulously saving every penny. With only 1 year of formal schooling, he decided to learn a trade. He chose barbering. In 1878, at the age of 20, with just $11 in his pocket, he walked to the small town of Jonesboro and opened his first barber shop. But his ambition was bigger than a small town shop. In 1883, he made the move to Atlanta. He got a job in a shop on Marietta Street, but he wasn't content to work for someone else. Within 6 months, he'd bought a half stake in the business. This is where Herndon's genius really started to shine. He understood the twisted logic of the Jim Crow South. While black people were denied social equality, the white elite still wanted their services. Herndon decided to become the absolute best at providing one of those services. He didn't just cut hair, he created an experience. His barbershops were designed to cater exclusively to Atlanta's most powerful white citizens, the lawyers, judges, and businessmen who ran the city. By the turn of the century, he owned 3 opulent barbershops. The crown jewel was his shop at 66 Peachtree Street, which he opened in 1904, a masterpiece of luxury known as the Crystal Palace. It was adorned with crystal chandeliers and gold fixtures. Customers walked through grand mahogany doors into a room lined with French mirrors. 25 custom-made barber chairs were upholstered in fine leather. He was serving the very men who upheld the segregated system, and he was making a fortune doing it. But Herndon was more than just a barber. He was a shrewd and disciplined investor. He took his profits and began buying up real estate, quietly becoming one of Atlanta's largest black property owners. He was cautious and strategic. He avoided debt and built his wealth brick by brick. His personal life also reflected his rise. He married Adrienne McNeil, a professor at Atlanta University, connecting him to the city's black intellectual elite. As a symbol of his success, he commissioned a magnificent mansion designed by his wife and built entirely by black craftsmen. He was a man of contrasts. He catered to white supremacy to build his fortune, yet he was also a founding member of the Niagara movement, the forerunner to the NAACP. He was accumulating capital in a white world, but was about to use it in a way that would fundamentally empower the black world. His barbershops made him rich, but it was his next move that would make him a legend. While Alonzo Herndon was methodically building his empire, another ambitious black entrepreneur arrived in Atlanta with a very different vision. His name was Heman Perry. If Herndon was the pragmatist, Perry was the grand dreamer. If Herndon built with brick and mortar, Perry built with audacious ideas. He didn't just want a successful business, he wanted to construct an entire self-sufficient black economic universe. Born in Houston, Texas in 1873, Perry had a humble upbringing and left school before the 8th grade to work. He tried various ventures, including growing cotton and playing the stock market, where he reportedly lost everything he had. After a series of setbacks, he turned his attention back to the insurance industry. He saw that major insurance companies rarely employed black agents and that most black-owned operations were small, unstable burial societies. He spotted a massive, unserved market. Perry's ambition was staggering. He decided to create a legal reserve life insurance company for black people, which required a state-mandated startup capital of $100,000, an almost unimaginable sum for a black man to raise in the early 1900s. His initial efforts failed, but Perry had immense charisma. He eventually came to Atlanta and met the undisputed king of black business, Alonzo Herndon. The two men were a study in contrasts. Herndon was cautious and debt-averse. Perry was a risk-taker who thought on a scale few could comprehend. Perry convinced Herndon to buy a substantial block of stock. With Herndon's backing, Perry finally succeeded. In 1913, he founded the Standard Life Insurance Company, the first black-owned company in Georgia to sell ordinary life insurance. Standard Life was a colossal success, but for Perry, the insurance company was never the end goal. It was the engine. He saw Standard Life as the financial heart of a much larger body, believing economic development was the true path to liberation. He used the profits to launch an astonishing array of interconnected businesses under a parent organization called the Service Company, a pharmacy, a printing company, a construction firm, and more. He was building a buy us for us empire on Auburn Avenue, and he wasn't finished. Just as the economic foundations of Auburn Avenue were being laid, a wave of terror swept through Atlanta. The year was 1906, and the city was a tinderbox of racial animosity. White resentment was boiling over, fueled by job competition and a bitter governor's race where both candidates, Hoke Smith and Clark Howell, used their newspapers to stoke racial fears. The spark came on Saturday, September 22nd, 1906. Atlanta's newspapers published lurid, unsubstantiated reports of assaults on white women by black men. None were ever proven, but the damage was done. By nightfall, a mob of more than 10,000 white men and boys had gathered downtown, hungry for blood. For days, they rampaged through the city. They pulled black men and women from streetcars, beating them mercilessly. They roamed the streets, shooting, stabbing, and lynching anyone they could find. Officially, at least 25 African Americans were killed. Unofficial reports suggest the number could be as high as 100. The massacre was a horrifying confirmation of the black community's deepest fears. It proved that economic success was no shield against racial hatred. Alonzo Herndon's magnificent Crystal Palace barbershop serving an exclusively white clientele was targeted. The mob smashed his grand plate glass windows and terrorized his employees. The message was clear: no matter how successful you were in the eyes of the mob, you were still black. But the 1906 Atlanta race massacre did something else. It was a crucible. It burned away any lingering hope that black people could find safety within the white power structure. The philosophy of accommodation, long preached by figures like Booker T. Washington, was exposed as a fragile defense. In the aftermath, the drive to build up Auburn Avenue into a fortress of black enterprise intensified dramatically. The massacre solidified the idea that black businesses needed a safe haven. If they couldn't rely on the city for protection, they would have to rely on each other. The fire of 1906, intended to terrorize and subjugate, instead forged an ironclad resolve. Out of this terror, the golden age of sweet Auburn would truly be born. In the wake of the 1906 massacre, a self-contained black economy wasn't just an aspiration, it was a matter of survival. This urgency fueled the golden era of sweet Auburn, with Alonzo Herndon and Heman Perry erecting the institutions that became the community's financial pillars. In 1905, just before the riot, Herndon had made his most transformative investment. He saw families struggling to afford proper burials because white insurers wouldn't cover them. Seeing both a business opportunity and a moral obligation, he purchased a small, failing burial association. While one source claims the purchase price was $140, what is certain is that he deposited $5,000 of his own money with the state to secure its charter, reorganizing it as the Atlanta Mutual Insurance Association. This was the birth of what would become the Atlanta Life Insurance Company. Herndon applied the same meticulous principles as he had to his barbershops. By 1922, the company was reorganized and renamed, expanding into numerous other states. Atlanta Life didn't just sell policies, it sold dignity and provided stable professional careers for black men and women. At the same time, Heman Perry's vision extended far beyond insurance. He saw the need for a black-owned bank to provide the credit that white banks denied black entrepreneurs. After a humiliating experience being refused service at a white-owned store, his resolve crystallized. So that black business owners could operate independently, Perry and 4 partners, the Fervent Five, took the next monumental step. On August 16, 1921, they opened Citizens Trust Bank on Auburn Avenue. It was an instant cornerstone, promoting black business growth and, crucially, facilitating home ownership for a generation of black Atlantans. The bank was so well run that it survived the Great Depression. In 1934, it became the first black-owned bank to join the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, FDIC, followed by membership in the Federal Reserve System in 1947. With Herndon's Atlanta Life, Perry's Standard Life, and Citizens Trust Bank, Auburn Avenue had its 3-legged stool of black finance. This core fueled an explosion of enterprise. The street came alive with black-owned newspapers like the Atlanta Daily World, doctors, lawyers, and legendary restaurants. There were vibrant nightclubs like the Top Hat Club, later the Royal Peacock, which hosted stars like B.B. King and Gladys Knight. This bustling ecosystem is what civic leader John Wesley Dobbs christened Sweet Auburn. The name captured the pride of a street built against all odds. It was a place where, for a few remarkable decades, black economic independence was a living, breathing reality. In 1956, Fortune magazine made it official, calling Auburn Avenue the richest Negro street in the world. Every golden age must face its twilight. For Sweet Auburn, the decline was a story of tragic irony, marked by the divergent fates of its two greatest architects. Heman Perry, the brilliant visionary, was undone by his own boundless ambition. His empire was a complex web of companies financed by the reserves of Standard Life Insurance. This stretched his resources dangerously thin. When an economic downturn hit in the mid-1920s, Perry's debt-leveraged empire began to crumble. By 1925, he had lost control of Standard Life, which was merged with a white-owned firm. The man who dreamed of a self-contained black economy had to watch his creation fall into white ownership. Alonzo Herndon's empire, in stark contrast, endured. Built on conservative investment and minimal debt, Atlanta Life Insurance Company weathered the Great Depression and continued to grow. When Herndon died in 1927, he left a stable and powerful institution to his son, Norris. Herndon's cautious approach had proven more resilient. However, even Atlanta Life couldn't stop the larger forces that began to erode Sweet Auburn's unique position. The most significant, ironically, was the very thing the community had fought for: integration. The end of legal segregation in the 1960s was a monumental victory, but it had an unforeseen consequence. For decades, the street had a captive market. With desegregation, black consumers could now shop anywhere, and many businesses and residents left the old neighborhood. The second blow was physical. During the era of urban renewal, the construction of the Downtown Connector Highway tore directly through the district, bisecting the community and demolishing homes and businesses. What segregation had built, the bulldozer tore apart. By the 1980s, the once vibrant street had fallen into urban blight. In 1992, the National Trust for Historic Preservation named Sweet Auburn one of America's most endangered historic places. The golden age was over, but the true legacy of Sweet Auburn wasn't just in its buildings. It was about to fuel the next great chapter of black history. The physical decline of Auburn Avenue wasn't the end of its story, it was a transition. The wealth and influence cultivated on that street didn't vanish, they transformed. The old money of Sweet Auburn became the seed capital for political power and the fight for civil rights. The institutions built by Herndon and Perry became the financial engine of the civil rights movement. When protesters needed bail money, they could turn to Citizens Trust Bank. When organizations like the NAACP and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which both had offices on Auburn Avenue, needed funding, the district's wealth was there to support them. The dream of economic independence had laid the groundwork for the fight for social and political equality. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself was a product of this world. Born on Auburn Avenue, his family's church, Ebenezer Baptist, was one of the street's spiritual anchors. This legacy found its political culmination in 1973 with the election of Maynard Jackson as Atlanta's first black mayor. Jackson, a grandson of John Wesley Dobbs, who coined the name Sweet Auburn, embodied the principle of turning civil rights victories into silver rights, tangible economic empowerment. He looked at the city's contracting and saw that less than 1% went to minority-owned firms in a majority black city. Jackson decided to change that. His most impactful policy came during the massive expansion of Hartsfield Airport. Jackson mandated that at least 25% of all contracts for the project must go to minority-owned businesses. The city's white business establishment was outraged, but Jackson held firm. He won. Within 5 years, minority participation in city contracts skyrocketed to nearly 39%. This single policy created a new class of black millionaires in Atlanta and dramatically scaled up existing black-owned firms. Maynard Jackson had effectively institutionalized the vision of Sweet Auburn on a city-wide scale, solidifying Atlanta's reputation as a black Mecca. The story of Sweet Auburn is a powerful reminder of what's possible, even in the face of impossible odds. These hidden histories of resilience and ingenuity are all around us, waiting to be told. To discover more stories of the people and places that have shaped our world, make sure to subscribe and join our community of history explorers. Today, Auburn Avenue is a place of memory, a designated National Historic Landmark trying to balance preservation with revitalization. But its true legacy lives on, not just in the historic buildings or the enduring presence of Atlanta Life and Citizens Trust Bank, but in the very fabric of modern Atlanta. The fortunes built on that street proved that economic empowerment is a critical weapon in the fight for justice, a lesson that echoes through the generations, from a former slave who built a barbershop to a mayor who remade a city.